You think revenge is loud. It's not. It's quiet. It's a smile held steady while the people who destroyed you walk straight into your trap. I'm Roger Coleman, and last Christmas Eve I made my wife taste what betrayal really feels like. If you're watching this, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard my story. I want to know how far the fires spread.
You knew. Bethany's voice cracked like glass. The question hung in the air between us, trembling in the candlelight before it shattered completely. All around the Christmas lights blinked their slow rhythm, gold, red, green, painting my dining room in colors too warm for the chill that had just entered. I'd spent hours arranging this table, white linen, crystal glasses, rosemary tucked into each napkin. The lamb roast sat in its own fragrant cloud. Everything looked perfect. Perfect was the point. Victor Hale, the man who'd once looked me in the eye and told me healing starts with honesty, sat frozen across from me. The stem of his wineglass caught between his trembling fingers. His face, so carefully composed in public, was draining of color. And Bethany, my wife, my once best friend, stared first at me, then at the woman standing in our doorway. Emily Hale. Her presence hit the room like thunder under silk. She didn't say a word, didn't have to. Her eyes said it all. Eyes that had been awake for nights, hollowed by the kind of knowledge that only comes from reading your husband's messages and realizing every word of tenderness had a duplicate. Paul Simon's Silent Night was still playing softly from the speaker behind me, tinny and inappropriate. I wanted to laugh at the irony, silent indeed. I set down my wine. My hand didn't shake this time. 6 weeks of rehearsal. 6 weeks of pretending not to know. 6 weeks of smiling when Bethany told me in that light voice she used when she thought she was being subtle, "Victor will be joining us for Christmas dinner. I think it could be healing, Raj." Healing. She said it like mercy. I heard it like a dare. Now the man himself was staring at his own wife like a ghost had materialized. Emily stepped forward, her heels tapping steady against the floorboards I'd sanded and varnished with my own hands. Funny, all my life I'd worked with wood because it behaved predictably. You cut it, it split where you told it to. It didn't lie. Bethany's lips parted. Emily, this isn't... Emily lifted a hand, just one, small, controlled. She was the quiet kind of furious, the kind that doesn't need volume to make your bones ache. "Don't," she said. The air in the room tightened. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled beneath my chin. "Well," I said softly, "we're all here." No one moved. The candles hissed as a drop of wax hit the runner. The smell of rosemary and smoke filled my lungs. The roast was cooling fast. "You invited her," Bethany said. Her tone wasn't accusation. It was disbelief, the sound of a woman realizing the man she'd underestimated had been awake the whole time. "I did," I said. Victor swallowed hard. "Roger, this isn't the right time," I finished for him. "You're a marriage counselor, doctor. Surely you know there's no such thing as a right time for the truth." He opened his mouth, then shut it again, jaw flexing. Bethany reached for her wine, but her hand trembled too much to lift it. The glass tilted, sloshing deep red onto my tablecloth. The stain spread slow and dark like a wound. I smiled. The one I'd practiced, the one that didn't reach my eyes. "You look surprised," I told them. I thought therapists believed in exposure therapy. "Roger." "Please," Bethany whispered. "Not like this." "How, then?" I asked. "You wanted healing. Here it is. You can't heal what you won't name." Emily let out a breath, half laugh, half sob. She'd been silent too long. "Name it," she said, looking at her husband. "Go on. Tell him." Victor's eyes darted to the windows as if the winter rain outside might offer an exit. His voice came out small. "Bethany and it was a mistake." "Which part?" I asked. "The affair with your patient, or the lying to your wife?" He didn't answer. Bethany turned to me, her eyes always so quick to pity. Now just begged. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Roger." I stopped. My voice was calm, too calm. It startled even me.
You did mean it. You meant every text, every meeting, every touch. You just didn't mean to get caught." Her breath caught like she'd been slapped. The lights from the tree flickered, casting a kaleidoscope of red and green across her face. I remembered stringing them up this morning, careful with each bulb, thinking how they'd look reflected in her eyes. Now they just made her look like a painting that had started to peel. Emily finally moved closer to the table. She placed a small envelope on the runner, a single motion deliberate. "Your office records," she said to Victor. "Emails, hotel receipts. You used the joint account for your counseling retreats. I guess we both paid for your therapy." The silence that followed had weight. I felt the room spinning not from anger, but from the strange clarity that comes after it. For weeks I'd imagined this moment as an explosion. I thought I'd feel fire. But what I felt was stillness. Because this was justice, not chaos. Bethany reached across the table for me, but I pulled my hand back. "Roger, please, I love you." "No," I said softly. "You love the man who didn't know. You don't love this one." Victor stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "This is insane. You planned this." "Yes." He blinked, searching for moral ground and finding none. "You don't understand what she's been through." "Neither do you," Emily snapped. "You talk about empathy like it's a diploma, Victor. You don't feel anything unless you can bill it by the hour." He flinched. She turned to me then, and something like respect passed between us. Two people dragged through the same wreckage, now standing on the same shore. "Why?" Bethany asked, voice breaking. "Why would you humiliate me like this?" I looked at her, really looked. 25 years of life together condensed into a single ache in my chest. "Because I said you humiliated yourself long before I ever opened that door." The storm outside cracked, once thunder rattling the windows. For a second everything glowed white. Then darkness returned and the room was just us, four people caught in a tableau of truth. I reached for my glass again, raised it slightly. "Merry Christmas," I said. No one drank. Bethany's tears slid silently down her cheeks, dripping onto the tablecloth beside the stain of wine. The two reds bled together until you couldn't tell which was which. I watched it spread. I'd expected triumph, but what came was something else, release maybe. The slow uncoiling of a knot that had lived in my chest for too long. Outside the rain began to fall harder, streaking down the windows in ribbons. Emily turned and walked out without another word. The door closed behind her with a soft click, the same sound that had started this all. Bethany buried her face in her hands. Victor tried to reach for her, but I stopped him with a look. "Don't," I said. "Not in my house." He froze. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping the wood. I gathered the plates one by one, stacking them carefully. The motion steadied me. Kraft has always done that, even when the pieces were broken. Finally, I turned to them. "You should both go," I said. "The meal's over." Bethany looked up, eyes hollow. "Roger, what happens now?" "Now," I said. "Now you learn what silence feels like when it isn't merciful." I walked to the sink, set the dishes down gently, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time in months, I didn't see a fool. I saw a man. Behind me, the front door opened, then closed. Their footsteps faded into the rain. The house exhaled. I stood there in the half-light, the smell of burnt rosemary still in the air, and whispered to no one, "If you want to understand how we got here, I'll take you back." The smell of rosemary and garlic still hung in the air that night, the kind of scent that usually meant peace in my house. It was October 12th, our 25th wedding anniversary, a quarter of a century of surviving life together, the house payments, the miscarried plans, the slow drift of middle age. I had spent the whole afternoon polishing silver lighting candles, roasting lamb the way Bethany loved. A Sinatra record played low on the turntable, the kind of music that smoothed out the edges of a long marriage. She was upstairs taking a bath. I could hear the water running steady as a heartbeat through the ceiling. I remember thinking how good it felt to still want to make an effort after 25 years. How proud my mother would have been to see that I'd kept my vows when so many didn't. Then her phone buzzed. At first I ignored it. A second buzz came sharper, more insistent. It was sitting on the counter beside her wine glass, a small pink case with the corner cracked. Bethany never left it behind. Something about that alone made me pause. I told myself not to look. That trust meant leaving the curtain closed even when the light leaked through. Then it buzzed again, 3 short vibrations back to back, like a heartbeat speeding up. When I picked it up, I meant only to silence it. That's what I'll tell myself forever, but the preview flashed before my thumb could move. You were magnificent last night. I can still taste the wine on your lips. V. My hand froze. The name hit me harder than the words. V. Only one man in her orbit fit that initial Dr. Victor Hale, the marriage counselor we'd been seeing 6 months ago. I told myself it couldn't be him, that it had to be someone from work, a joke, a misfire. I unlocked the phone. The code was our anniversary date. The irony burned. The message thread opened into a world I didn't recognize. Dozens of texts, some playful, some cruel in their honesty. V. I dreamt about your voice again.
You're stronger than he'll ever know. B. Don't say that. He's a good man. Just predictable. V. Predictable isn't passion. You deserve passion. Then what do? V. We keep healing. In private. My stomach turned. Healing. That's what he'd called it in his sessions too. Emotional recalibration. Learning to speak the language of vulnerability. I scrolled higher, my thumb shaking. There it was, a photo. Blurred close skin and candlelight, a man's arm around her shoulders, the freckle on his wrist unmistakable. I'd seen that freckle across a conference table when he'd adjusted his watch before telling me marriage isn't about ownership, Roger. It's about safety. Safe. The world tilted. Upstairs water sloshed. She was humming. Bethany always hummed when she felt content. That sound so small and innocent felt obscene now. The bottle of Cabernet I'd opened for dinner slipped from my hand, hit the counter, rolled and thudded against the backsplash. I caught it before it fell, but not before the red wine splashed across the marble like a warning. I set it down carefully, too carefully. The phone buzzed again. V, are you alone? I miss you already. I wanted to throw the damn thing across the room. Instead, I placed it exactly where I'd found it. The screen dimmed and went black, reflecting my face back at me, a stranger older than I remembered, with eyes that didn't blink. There are moments in life when something in you stops, not your heart, but something deeper. The part that believes, the part that prays the people you love won't choose cruelty when kindness costs the same. That part of me died right there between Sinatra's croon and the sound of bathwater draining upstairs. I blew out the candles one by one. The room folded into darkness. When she came down 20 minutes later, her hair damp and her cheeks glowing, she smiled like nothing had shifted. It smells wonderful, she said. You always make the house feel like Christmas. I smiled back. I don't know how I managed it. Maybe some survival instinct, the kind that keeps deer still when the rifle's already aimed. We ate in near silence. She talked about her classes, her students, a new research proposal she was excited about. Her hands gestured gently, elegant as always. The hands of the woman I'd built a life around. Every time her phone vibrated, she ignored it. I pretended not to notice. After dinner, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you, Roger, for still trying. Always, I said. My voice didn't crack. When she leaned in to kiss my cheek, I caught the faintest trace of wine that wasn't ours. A different vintage, sharper. Later that night, when she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above us. Its rhythmic hum felt almost hypnotic. I counted each rotation until I realized I wasn't breathing in sync with it anymore. Instead, I was cataloging. Her late evenings at faculty meetings, the weekends she said she needed solitude to think through her research, the way she'd started dressing softer, younger, like the woman she was when we met. It all fit now, every loose screw in the furniture of our life. I turned my head to look at her, the woman who used to make me coffee every morning, who once told me she wanted to grow old in the same house surrounded by the same trees. She looked peaceful in sleep, innocent again.
That's what betrayal does. It steals the right to find beauty in what's familiar. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I got out of bed and went to my workshop. The smell of pine and varnish met me like an old friend. I picked up a chisel not because I needed it, but because it felt honest, sharp, heavy, real. For years I'd believed that fixing things, chairs, tables, hearts, just took patience. Sand the edges glue, the cracks press them together long enough and they'd hold. But some breaks aren't meant to be repaired. Some are meant to be displayed gold, running through the fracture lines so everyone can see where it shattered. That was the night I stopped being the man who waited for honesty to arrive. That was the night I started planning how to build the truth myself. In the dark workshop, I drew it in my mind, every detail of what would come. Not rage, not chaos, something slower, precise, crafted like the furniture I made. A structure designed to hold the weight of what they'd done. And when I finally went back upstairs, the house was silent again. Bethany stirred in her sleep, murmured something that sounded like Victor. I stood there watching her mouth form his name. Then I turned off the light. A plan had begun. By the second week after our anniversary, I knew pretending would be my armor. You can't fight a war in your own house by storming the front door. You fight it with silence, with calm, with patience. That's when I called Samir. He used to be a cop back when Savannah still felt small and honest. We'd met years ago when he taught a self-defense class at the community center. He was the kind of man who never said more than he needed to, bald, careful eyes, always taking notes even when he didn't look like he was. When I called him, I didn't bother with pretense. I need proof, I said. My wife's cheating with our marriage counselor. There was a pause. Then a quiet whistle. Well, he said, that's a twist I haven't heard before. We met 2 days later in a diner on River Street. The place smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, and I remember thinking that the smell suited the situation, greasy, real, and hard to wash off. Samir opened a small notebook. I'll need her schedule, his office address, and any travel patterns you've noticed. I handed him a folder. Already done. He nodded, impressed but not surprised. You want discretion? No, I said, stirring my coffee. I want precision. For the next 10 days, I lived like a man rehearsing for a role, husband, friend, fool. I watched Bethany pack her bag for a conference in Charleston. She kissed my cheek before leaving, said, I'll call tonight, and didn't. Samir called 3 days later. She wasn't in Charleston, he said. She was in Asheville, cabin up in the mountains, checked in with a Dr. Hale. He used his company card for the booking. My grip tightened on the phone. Company card. Yeah, apparently his clinic hosts couples retreats. I got copies of the invoices. He billed it under therapeutic evaluation. Creative, huh? He sent the photos that night. Bethany in a red sweater standing beside Victor at a mountain overlook. Her hair caught by the wind. His hand rested low on her back, possessive, familiar. Another shot the two of them inside a small cafe, laughing, heads close together. I studied those pictures until my eyes burned. What broke me wasn't the intimacy. It was how light she looked, unburdened, younger. That was the smile she used to give me before years and mortgages and quiet disappointments built walls between us. That night she came home humming, snow dusted on her coat. I was sanding a table in the garage. She poked her head in. You're still up. Couldn't sleep. Same, she said. The cabin was beautiful. You'd have loved the woodwork there. I bet I would. I said and meant it. I watched her eyes when she said it. There's something about guilt. It makes the pupils widen just enough. The voice soften at the end of a sentence. She smiled too fast. She always smiled too fast when she lied. I learned her new schedule like a craftsman measuring joints. Tuesdays, faculty meetings that ran too late. Thursdays, yoga. Weekends, solo writing retreats. I said nothing. I kept cooking her dinner, washing her coffee mug, asking about her students. Each time she looked away, I memorized the exact second it happened. Meanwhile, Samir dug deeper. He tracked Victor's car, his calls, his expense reports. Every night, the man went home to a house in Midtown where his wife, Emily Hale, still waited. Samir even managed a photo, Victor unloading groceries beside a woman with chestnut hair and soft features, wedding band still on her finger. He's living a double life, Samir said. Your wife's not the only one in the dark. That's when it shifted, the rage, the nausea, the humiliation. It hardened into something sharper. I wasn't just a man betrayed anymore. I was a man holding evidence, a craftsman with materials finally in hand. One evening I found Bethany sitting at the kitchen table grading papers. She looked tired but content. Long day, I asked. She smiled faintly. They're kids. They think life is about grades. They'll learn. Her phone lit up beside her hand. The preview flashed before she could hide it. V. Same hotel next week, miss. The way you laugh when I burn the toast. Her thumb darted to the screen, face flushing. Work message, she said quickly. I nodded, gentle. Of course. Inside, I was already counting the days until next week. That night, I went into her office while she showered. I wasn't proud of it, but pride had already left the building weeks ago. I found a folder tucked beneath her research files, receipts from hotel stays, mileage logs, a brochure from the Hale Relationship Clinic. The handwriting across the top read, "Healing takes courage." It was his handwriting. I took photos of everything, then placed it all back exactly as it was. Later in bed, I watched her scroll her phone under the covers. She turned the brightness down to a thin glow, thinking I was asleep. I closed my eyes and listened to her soft laugh, the kind reserved for someone who wasn't me. In the morning, I told her I'd been offered a commission, a handcrafted dining table for a client downtown. It was true enough to pass as truth. What I didn't tell her was that the money would go to Samir's retainer and a lawyer's consultation. By the end of November, the file Samir handed me was thick as a novel. Inside, photos of Bethany and Victor in hotels across Georgia and the Carolinas. Copies of expense reports showing Victor billed therapeutic sessions during those trips. A GPS log confirming both their phones were in the same location overnight. Screenshots of emails from Victor's clinic account to Bethany's personal one. The final document was what sealed it, a bank statement from Hale's practice. Transfers from his business account to a florist, to a wine shop, to a jewelry store. All marked client appreciation. I flipped through the photos in silence. Each image was a nail, each receipt a hammer. Samir watched me carefully. You want me to keep digging? I closed the folder. No, I've got enough. He hesitated. What are you gonna do? I looked out the diner window. The river was moving slow that morning, all gray and calm, like it had seen every kind of storm already. I'm going to build something. I said finally, something that lasts. When I got home, Bethany was in the kitchen making tea. She looked up smiling, the smile she thought could still fool me. How was your meeting? She asked. I kissed her cheek, the motion practiced smooth. Productive. She turned away to pour her tea. I studied her back, the familiar curve of her shoulders, the small freckle on her neck I'd kissed 1,000 times. I felt nothing but a strange, steady calm. That was the day I stopped watching her out of pain and started watching her out of purpose. Every word, every movement, every false smile became part of the design. Because the truth was no longer the goal. The truth was just the beginning. The fundraiser was one of those Savannah affairs where everyone dressed like they still believed in old money and good manners. The art museum's courtyard was strung with fairy lights. Soft jazz floated through the air, polite conversation layered over the sound of champagne being poured. I wasn't supposed to be there. My client had donated one of my handmade tables for the auction and insisted I attend. You need to be seen, Roger, she said. Your work deserves a face. So I put on the only suit that still fit me right. The one Bethany had bought for our 20th anniversary, and went. Bethany didn't come. She said she had a department dinner. I remember standing near a sculpture of an iron angel sipping club soda, watching strangers talk like they weren't lonely. Then I saw her, Emily Hale, though I didn't know her name yet. She was talking to a woman from the university board, laughing, one hand resting lightly on her wine glass.
There was something tired in her posture, the way she carried her shoulders like she was protecting herself from a weight no one else could see. She had the kind of quiet grace that comes from surviving too many small disappointments. I don't know why I noticed her, maybe because she didn't perform like the others. She just existed, steady, dignified, a little distant. We ended up side by side near the dessert table. She nodded politely, and I said something about the humidity being merciful for once. She smiled, a real one, not the polite kind. "Are you an artist?" she asked. I hesitated. "A carpenter, technically. I make furniture. Some people call that art." "That depends on the hands," she said. "And the heart behind them." There was something in her voice, a weariness that matched mine. I didn't know why it felt familiar, but it did. She introduced herself simply, Emily. No last name, no small talk about spouses or family. We talked about craftsmanship, about how wood remembers touch, about patience. She said she was married to her work and laughed like the words tasted bitter. I told her my wife taught psychology. She nodded thoughtfully. "That explains your calm," she said. "You speak like someone who's had to listen for a living." The band shifted to a slow tune. She excused herself to take a call, and for some reason I watched her walk away. Not out of attraction, out of curiosity maybe, or recognition. When she turned, the light caught her left hand. The ring gleamed. Simple gold band. 2 weeks later, Samir gave me the new photos. He'd been tailing Victor for a week. "He's getting sloppy," Samir said, sliding the folder across the diner booth. I opened it. The first photo hit like a slap, Bethany and Victor leaving a restaurant in Atlanta, his hand at the small of her back. Another at a gas station laughing over coffee. Then the third photo. Victor outside a house, different woman this time. Same casual intimacy, same familiarity. He was unloading grocery bags from his car. The woman was standing on the porch holding a letter, her face half turned to the camera. It took me less than a second to know. Emily. I felt my stomach drop. The courtyard lights, the faint perfume, her tired smile, it all came rushing back. "She's his wife," Samir said. "Emily Hale. Married 15 years. She doesn't know. Not yet." I sat back, the photo trembling slightly in my hand. "She deserves to." Samir shrugged. "Up to you, brother. Some people would rather stay blind, but I couldn't leave her there trapped in the same lie I'd been living. A week later I called her. Her number was on the gala's donor list. I said I'd found something that might concern her husband's foundation finances. She agreed to meet, polite, cautious, unsuspecting. We met at a quiet cafe near Forsyth Park. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, gold and slow. She arrived in a beige coat, hair pulled back, eyes curious but guarded. "Mr. Coleman," she asked, taking a seat. "Roger, please." She smiled faintly. "How can I help you?" I slid the envelope across the table. "It's not about help, it's about truth." Her brow furrowed. She opened it, just one photo inside. Victor and Bethany at the cabin, arms around each other. The timestamp in the corner read October 14th. At first she didn't move, her gaze locked on the photo like she was reading a language she hadn't known she spoke. Then her lips parted, a small, fractured breath. "Where did you get this?" "I hired someone," I said quietly. "My wife is the woman in that picture." The words hung between us. The sound of plates clinking and soft jazz from the speakers felt miles away. She looked up, eyes wide, searching my face for cruelty. There was none. Only the tired honesty of someone who'd already drowned and was offering her a hand up. Her fingers trembled. "I thought he was working late," she whispered. "All those nights. I thought she was at yoga," I said. For a long moment we just sat there, two strangers bound by the same wound. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "How long have you known?" "Since our anniversary." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Happy anniversary." I smiled without meaning to. It was the kind of smile you give when the only other option is breaking. She wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. "What do you want from me, Mr. Coleman?" "Nothing," I said. "I just thought you should know. Lies like these."
They rot in silence. She studied me for a while, then leaned back. "You're a good man," she said softly. "Good men always think truth will save them." "Maybe not save," I said, "but it gives the pain a name." She looked down at the photo again. "He'll deny it. He always does. I've seen him flirt with other women, but he calls it empathy. Says it's part of therapy." God, I believed him. I said nothing. The hurt didn't need an echo. Finally, she whispered almost to herself, "You don't want revenge, Mr. Coleman. You want respect back." I met her gaze, steady, unflinching. "Sometimes I said they're the same thing." She exhaled a sound halfway between a sob and a sigh. "What will you do?" I folded my hands. "I don't know yet, but when I do, it'll be quiet." The light shifted on the wall behind her, a slow, moving shadow from the passing clouds. For a moment I saw the future there, sharp edges, broken glass, but also something else, balance. Before we parted, she pressed the photo back into my hand. "Keep it," she said. "You'll need it more than I will." Outside, the sky had turned the color of wet pewter. We walked in opposite directions, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you find someone else who understands your exact flavor of pain. It doesn't heal you, but it steadies your aim. As I reached my truck, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I didn't look broken anymore. I looked ready. The first time I said the words out loud, "I'm going to expose them." Emily just stared at me across the small diner table, the same one where Samir used to deliver his reports. The morning light was thin and colorless, the kind that makes the world look half-finished. She stirred her coffee for a long time before answering. "You're sure?" she asked. "Once this starts, there's no going back." I nodded. "They built it on lies. I'll end it with truth." She exhaled slow and even. "Then we do it clean. No yelling, no blood, just light." That became our rule: no chaos, no dirt, only clarity. We began planning like people planning a small war disguised as civility.
Bethany had already mentioned it in passing.
"Wouldn't it be nice to have Dr. Hale over for Christmas dinner?" she said one evening, stirring her soup. "After everything he's done for us, I think it's the least we can do." I almost laughed. I bit the inside of my cheek instead. "Sure," I said. "Let's make it special." She smiled, relieved, mistaking my calm for forgiveness. She had no idea that was the night I began counting down the days to her reckoning. Emily handled the legal side. Her husband's clinic was a registered therapeutic practice under state and federal ethics codes. Sleeping with a client or a client's spouse wasn't just immoral, it was career-ending. "I'll draft the complaint," she told me. "We'll submit it to the Board of Professional Conduct after the dinner. You'll attach your statement and the evidence. They'll have no choice but to suspend his license." I hesitated. "You've done this before." Her mouth twitched. "I've been a lawyer's wife long enough to read the fine print." We met in secret every few days, coffee shops, park benches, sometimes in my workshop after dark. She'd bring her laptop, I'd bring the evidence. Together we built a case strong enough to bury them. The file grew thicker. Photographs of hotel stays with timestamps and receipts. Credit card records showing Victor's company paid for retreats. Screenshots of messages, his words dripping with therapy jargon. "Healing requires trust, Bethany." An audio clip. Samir captured of Victor bragging to a colleague. Sometimes connection crosses professional lines. Who am I to stop what's natural? Every item went into a labeled folder, every folder into a box. It was methodical, almost sacred. But revenge, no matter how quiet, has a heartbeat. Mine pulsed louder each day. To the world, I was still Roger the craftsman, the husband who smiled at dinner parties, who helped Bethany decorate the tree, who nodded along when she spoke of moving forward. Inside, I was measuring each lie like a carpenter measures angles, perfecting the cut before the final strike. Bethany began to mistake my stillness for peace. She'd sit on the couch at night, scrolling her phone, occasionally glancing at me. "You've been so patient with me," she said one evening, resting her head on my shoulder. Victor was right. You really are the most grounded man I know. Victor was right. He just didn't know how right. A week later, I met with Vivian Pierce, a divorce attorney recommended by one of my clients. Her office smelled like leather and rain. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, dressed in charcoal gray. Tell me everything, she said. I did every lie, every receipt, every photo. When I finished, she leaned back. You have grounds for divorce with misconduct and emotional distress. If you file with this evidence, you'll keep the house and the workshop. She'll lose any claim to joint assets used for her affair. Good, I said. She watched me for a moment. You don't sound angry. I was, I said. Now I'm focused. Vivian slid a stack of papers across the desk. Sign here when you're ready. But if you want my advice, her gaze softened. Wait until after your dinner. Let her hang herself with her own rope. I nodded. That's the plan. In early December, Emily and I finalized the details. The timing had to be perfect. Bethany's invitation to Victor was confirmed. Emily would arrive precisely 40 minutes into the meal, enough time for wine, laughter, and comfort. Enough time for them to feel safe. I'll walk in through the side door, Emily said, tracing a diagram on a napkin. You'll have the letter and evidence ready. Once I speak, you show your hand. I couldn't help but smile. You've got a strategist's mind. I've got a broken heart, she said. It sharpens things. We practiced what we'd say, how we'd move. It was absurd, two middle-aged people rehearsing emotional warfare like a stage play. But we both knew that for people like us, dignity was the only weapon left. Back home, I began setting the stage. I cleaned the dining room like it was a temple, polished the silver, replaced the bulbs, oiled the wood of the table until it glowed under the lights. I printed the evidence, sealed it in cream envelopes, labeled them simply Truth. On Christmas morning, I wrote one more letter to the ethics board. To whom it may concern, I am reporting a gross violation of professional conduct by Dr. Victor Hale, licensed marriage and family therapist. Enclosed is documentation proving an ongoing sexual relationship with his client's spouse. Roger Coleman. I placed it in a stamped envelope ready for delivery the next day. Then I opened the file Vivian had given me. The divorce papers waited inside unsigned. I touched the pen, then closed the folder. Not yet. Some endings deserve witnesses. That night, Bethany came home from shopping humming a Christmas tune. She kissed my cheek and said, I think this will be our best Christmas yet. I smiled at her, a real smile this time, though she couldn't have known why. Maybe it will, I said. As she turned away, the faint scent of Victor's cologne lingered on her coat. I felt the last trace of pain leave me. What remained wasn't hate. It was something steadier, resolve. For months, I'd carried their secret like a stone in my chest. Now I was ready to put it down. Emily texted me that night, everything's in place. Tomorrow we open the curtain. I wrote back, no curtain, just light. Then I turned off my phone, walked into the darkened dining room, and stared at the table I'd built with my own hands, the one that would soon host their truth. The wood gleamed under the faint reflection of Christmas lights, warm and patient. It looked like forgiveness, but it wasn't. It was preparation. 3 nights before Christmas, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Bethany had gone all out, holly on the mantel, gold-rimmed candles, a wreath on every door. She'd even brought down the crystal china we only used for anniversaries and funerals. Her laughter filled the air, light and bright and perfectly placed, like she was auditioning for joy. I played along, the dutiful husband, smiling at the right moments, nodding when she talked about renewal and forgiveness, and how proud Victor would be to see how far we've come. She said his name like he was God's understudy. Dr. Hale says trust isn't rebuilt in a day, she said that evening as we decorated the tree together. It's a process, but I think we're finally turning the corner, don't you? She reached up to hang a silver ornament. Her hand brushed mine, warm, careless. Yes, I said quietly. I think we are. The lights reflected in the window, small explosions of red and green trembling against the glass. For a moment I saw my own reflection beside hers, 2 silhouettes smiling the picture of peace. But underneath I could see the fracture hairline, thin and growing. Bethany hummed a carol while she wrapped gifts at the kitchen table, a cup of spiced cider steaming beside her. I watched from the doorway, the soft glow of the lights painting her face in gold. "You've been quiet lately," she said without looking up. "I'm thinking," I said. "About what? About how people change." She smiled faintly, her scissors slicing through the paper. "That's what love is, Roger. Change you grow through together." Together. The words stuck like a splinter. That night she said she needed to call Victor to finalize the seating arrangement for the dinner. She poured herself another glass of wine and stepped into her study, closing the door, but not fully. I didn't mean to listen. That's the lie I told myself later. But the air was too still, the temptation too close. I stood in the hallway, half hidden in the dark, her voice drifting out soft, intimate, laced with something that didn't belong in a therapist's tone. "I can't wait for this to be over," she whispered, a laugh trembling at the edge. "I hate sneaking around." Then his voice, deeper, self-assured, a tone I'd once mistaken for wisdom. "Victor, once the holidays are over, we'll tell them. We deserve to be happy." Bethany laughed again, low and easy. "We do." Then came silence, the quiet sound of a breath that wasn't mine. I stepped forward, the floorboard beneath me, creaking once. She froze. "Roger," I swallowed, keeping my voice even. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she said too quickly, "just finishing up plans with Dr. Hale." I nodded and walked away, heart pounding, but face calm. In the bathroom, I turned on the faucet, letting water run just to drown the noise in my head. My hands gripped the edge of the sink. The mirror caught me, the man I'd become. 50 years old, lines deeper than last winter, eyes darker than I remembered. There was pain there, yes, but also something else. Acceptance. The kind that doesn't beg, doesn't rage. The kind that waits. I studied the reflection as if meeting someone new. The Roger who believed in forgiveness had died weeks ago quietly, the night I opened that first text message. What looked back at me now wasn't cruel, just awake. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to justify what I was about to do. Some truths need an audience. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and went back to the living room. Bethany was on the couch, scrolling her phone, the faintest smile still playing on her lips. "Who was that?" I asked, feigning casual curiosity. She glanced up, eyes calm, rehearsed. "Victor. He's helping me plan the dinner playlist. He says music sets the tone for healing." I smiled. "Then make sure it's something fitting." "What do you mean?" "Something honest," I said, and walked past her to the porch. Outside, the air was cold, sharp with pine and sea salt. I lit a cigarette, my first in nearly 10 years, and watched the smoke twist into the night. Across the street, Christmas lights blinked on another family's porch, steady and clean. I thought of Emily sitting in her house somewhere, probably staring at the same kind of lights. Maybe wondering if I'd lost my nerve. I hadn't. I texted her. "Everything's ready." Her reply came quick. "He thinks he's untouchable." "Let's change that." I pocketed my phone and looked back through the window. Bethany was laughing at something on her screen. Her shoulders loose, head tilted, that small, careless tilt that used to make me love her. Now, it just made me wonder how long she'd practiced that laugh in someone else's arms. Later, when she went to bed, I stayed downstairs. The clock ticked loud in the quiet. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of a clean page. "The night ends." Underneath, I listed everything that had to happen. Candles lit before 700. Emily arrives, chapter 740. Evidence folder under chair 2. Board letter mailed 800 a.m. next morning. Divorce papers signed after. Each line was neat, straight, precise, the way I'd been trained to measure wood before cutting it, the way you ensure a clean break. When I finished, I closed the book and rested my palm on it. The surface was cool, smooth, solid, like resolve. Upstairs, Bethany's laughter faded into sleep. I stared at the ceiling, at the shadows cast by the Christmas lights flickering through the window. They moved like ghosts. By morning, she'd wake to another perfect day. She'd hum and smile and text her lover good morning, and I'd let her, because the truth was already built, nailed, glued, and sanded smooth.
All it needed now was light. Christmas night smelled like cinnamon roast beef and deceit. The house glowed in candlelight, the kind of warmth that fools even the people who built it. I'd polished every inch of that dining table myself. The wood shimmered beneath the reflection of the chandelier, golden, flawless, ready. Bethany moved around the room in a red dress that shimmered when she turned. She looked radiant in that soft, cinematic way people do when they believe they're winning. Her hair was pinned high, her smile sharp and easy. "Victor's bringing the dessert," she said, arranging the napkins into little origami swans. He said it's a surprise. "Perfect," I said, pouring the wine. When the doorbell rang, she actually gasped that delicate little intake of breath I used to think was beautiful. She opened the door, "Doctor." Victor Hale stood there, snow-dusting the shoulders of his charcoal coat, a bottle of Bordeaux in one hand and a box of truffles in the other. His grin was too wide, too practiced. The man had a therapist's face, calm, understanding, but hollow at the edges. "Roger," he said, voice warm as a sermon. "Merry Christmas, my friend." "Doctor," I replied, shaking his hand. "Glad you could make it." He glanced at Bethany with a flicker of something that might have been pride. "Wouldn't miss it. You two have come such a long way." Bethany smiled, eyes bright with a lie she'd learned to live in. "Thanks to you, we ate, we drank." Laughter filled the room, polite hollow laughter that bounced off the walls like echoes of something long dead. Bethany and Victor traded glances that burned too long to be innocent. I saw every brush of her fingers against the wine glass, every tiny smile she hid behind a sip. He leaned back, telling a story about helping a couple rediscover honesty, and she laughed like she was part of the punchline. I let it happen. I even clinked my glass when she toasted new beginnings. The clock on the wall ticked to 7:40, right on time. The doorbell didn't ring this time. Instead, the back door creaked open, slow, deliberate. Bethany frowned, half standing. "Roger, did you?" But I was already watching the doorway. Emily stepped in. The room froze. She wore black, not morning black, but sharp, deliberate black. Her hair was pinned neatly, her face unreadable. In her hand she held a plain envelope. Bethany's color drained. Victor blinked once, twice, then half rose from his seat. "Emily," he breathed. "What are you?" She didn't answer. She walked straight to the table, heels clicking against the wood, the sound cutting through the silence like a metronome counting down judgment. When she reached the center, she stopped, opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. It was printed large, glossy. Victor and Bethany tangled together in a resort balcony, sunlight behind them, mouths pressed in a kiss that left no room for doubt. She placed it on the table right beside the candles. The flame's reflection danced over their smiling faces. Then Emily slipped off her wedding ring, held it up for half a heartbeat, and dropped it next to the photo. The ring clinked against the glass and rolled to a stop. The sound was louder than thunder. Bethany covered her mouth. "Oh my God," Victor stammered. "Emily, listen, this isn't what it looks like." She turned her gaze on him, calm, lethal. "It looks like you," she said, "breaking your own vows for a client." His mouth opened, but no words came. That's when I stood. "Please," I said softly. "Sit down, doctor. You might want to hear this." Bethany looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Roger." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes, one white, one beige. I laid them gently on the table beside the photo and the ring. The first bore the letterhead of the State Board of Ethics for licensed therapists. The second was stamped Divorce Petition Coleman versus Coleman. "Merry Christmas, Doctor," I said, pouring myself another glass of wine. "And to you, Bethany. It's the season for truth, isn't it?" Bethany's hand trembled. You knew for a while," I said. "Long enough to give you both a chance to stop, long enough to see that you wouldn't." Victor straightened, trying to regain control. "Roger, let's be reasonable," I laughed softly. "Reasonable. Coming from the man who told me to open up emotionally while you were opening my wife's blouse." He winced. "I made a mistake." "No," I said, leaning in. "You made a choice. You treated our marriage like therapy notes, something to dissect, annotate, and file away when convenient. But tonight," I pushed the ethics letter toward him.
Tonight is your evaluation." Emily exhaled quietly, almost a sigh of relief. Bethany began to cry, not the sobs of guilt, but the panicked tears of someone whose script had been torn mid-scene. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, voice breaking. "Roger, I love you. I was lost." "Lost," I repeated. "You were guided, Bethany, by a man who made a career out of pretending he could fix people." Victor tried to stand again. "I think we should." Emily's voice sliced through him. "Sit down, Victor." He did. The silence that followed was heavy, sacred. Only the faint hum of the Christmas lights broke it. I looked at Bethany. Her mascara had smudged, streaking down like cracks in porcelain. "You said once that I was too calm," I told her. "Too safe. You wanted chaos. You got it." I turned to Emily. "You can send the letter tomorrow. The evidence is in the second folder." She nodded. "Already done." Victor's jaw clenched. "You can't ruin my life over a mistake." I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "Doctor, I didn't ruin it. You just built it on rotten wood." For a while no one spoke. The air was thick with heat from the candles and the smell of burning sugar from the kitchen. Bethany whispered something I couldn't hear. Maybe my name, maybe a prayer. I poured the last of the wine into my glass and raised it. "To honesty," I said. "It took you both long enough to find it." No one moved. Emily turned and walked toward the door without another word. The sound of it closing behind her was soft, almost merciful. Bethany sank into her chair, trembling. Victor buried his face in his hands. I took my coat from the hook, slid the divorce papers toward Bethany, and said quietly, "Merry Christmas." Then I left them in the glow of their own ruin, the perfect holiday lighting for betrayal. The morning after Savannah was quiet in that strange way only winter mornings can be. Gray sky, the air heavy with fog that made the world look paused. The house smelled like smoke and pine. The candles from the night before had burned down to wax puddles on the table. The plates were still there, the remnants of a dinner no one had finished, wine stains like blood on linen. Bethany was gone. Her suitcase had vanished from the closet, her perfume from the dresser. I didn't hear the door when she left. Maybe she'd waited until I was asleep, or maybe I just didn't care enough to notice. I sat at the table staring at the empty chair where she had wept hours earlier. The echo of it still clung to the walls. I wasn't proud. I wasn't relieved. Mostly I felt nothing. By noon, the phone started ringing. First Samir. "You did it, man," he said, almost laughing. "The board's already opened a file. My contact says Victor's suspended pending review." "You're going to bury that bastard." I thanked him. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Then Emily called. She didn't say much, just, "It's over. They've taken his license temporarily. I'm moving out today." Her tone wasn't triumphant either. "Just tired." "Where will you go?" I asked. "My sister's in Charleston," she said. "By the water. Maybe I'll remember how to breathe there." I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. "You deserve peace." "So do you, Roger." When the call ended, I just sat there listening to the house creak. Every sound felt like memory, her laugh from the kitchen, her humming while grading papers, the faint click of her heels when she'd come home late and swear she'd been stuck at faculty meetings. Now there was only silence. 2 weeks later, the local news picked it up. Savannah therapist under ethics investigation for relationship with client. The story spread fast. A colleague had leaked details, names withheld, but in a small city, people connected dots quickly. At the hardware store, someone clapped me on the back and said, "Hell of a move, Roger." Bet that felt good. I smiled because it was easier than explaining that it hadn't. At church, a woman from the choir whispered, "You must feel so vindicated." I nodded. But at night, when I lay in bed alone, vindication didn't keep me warm. The house was mine now, legally, officially, finally. Vivian Pierce had called to confirm. "It's done," she said. "The property, the business, everything stays with you." "Thank you," I said. "You did the right thing, Roger. Most people never fight back." Maybe, but fighting back wasn't healing. It was just surviving in a louder way. Bethany sent one message 3 days after the dinner. "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't matter, but I am. I didn't reply. She didn't write again. I heard she was staying with a colleague, another professor from the psychology department. A woman who had once told me that Bethany's just restless Roger, she needs excitement. Maybe that's what she found, or maybe she found nothing at all. The days stretched thin. I spent them sanding old furniture, letting the rhythm of the work quiet my thoughts. The smell of sawdust was cleaner than memory honest steady. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the empty chair in the workshop where she used to sit, flipping through design magazines, pretending to understand what I was building. Now the space stayed empty and the silence there was merciful. People stopped by, friends, neighbors, even my brother. They all said some version of the same thing. You showed them. You got your justice. You're free now. But none of it felt like freedom. Freedom, I realized, has a strange taste when it's mixed with ashes. One morning, 2 weeks into the new year, I sat on the porch with my coffee. The air was cold clean. The sun came up slow over the marshes, pale gold spilling through the mist. For a long while I didn't think of Bethany or Victor or anyone. I just watched the light crawl across the yard the way it always had before everything fell apart. Then, as the warmth reached my hands, I caught my reflection in the window, older, harder, but still there. I whispered it out loud, just to hear it. If revenge doesn't heal, what does? The question hung there, fragile as breath. Maybe the answer wasn't forgiveness. Maybe it wasn't love or justice or even peace. Maybe healing was something quieter, the courage to keep showing up to mornings like this alone but unbroken. I finished my coffee, the last curl of steam vanishing into the air, and whispered again, softer this time, I'm still here. The smell of wood glue and cedar became my kind of prayer. Spring came early to Savannah that year, and the light through the workshop windows hit the sawdust like glitter on air. I'd started keeping the doors open again, letting the neighborhood kids wander in when they were curious. At first they just watched me plane boards and sand tabletops. Then one by one they started asking questions. Can I try? Sure, I said. But mind your fingers. Wood's like people, it remembers every cut. That made them laugh even if they didn't understand it yet. By May, the place wasn't just a workshop anymore. It was a classroom. We built birdhouses and toy boats, sometimes small tables that parents could actually use. The kids came from tough homes, broken ones mostly. They didn't talk much at first, neither did I, but the rhythm of the tools filled the silence better than words ever could. When I handed them sandpaper, I said, "Go easy. You're not trying to erase the scars, just smooth them out." One of the boys, Malik, grinned and said, "Like people." "Exactly," I said. Emily stopped by every few weeks. She always brought something small, fresh-bred wildflowers, once a set of old books her husband had left behind when he moved out. She said she couldn't bear to look at them. We sat out back with coffee, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing small pieces of our lives. She told me she'd found part-time work at a legal aid office in Charleston. I told her about the kids in the workshop. "You look lighter," she said once. "I think I just stopped carrying the wrong things." She smiled. That's a kind of healing. Between us there was no romance, no pretense, just a quiet recognition that some people meet in the ruins and help each other stand again. I joined a local support group in June. It met in the basement of a small community church, plastic chairs, bad coffee, and a circle of people with eyes that had seen too much. There were stories of betrayal, loss, loneliness, and sometimes laughter that sounded a little too fragile. The first time I spoke, my voice shook. I thought revenge would fix me, I said, but all it did was clear the space. Healing's been quieter, slower, like sanding rough wood. You can't rush it, or it splinters worse. An older man across the circle nodded. Amen to that. By the fourth meeting, I was laughing again, really laughing, the kind that starts low in the chest and surprises you on the way out. That's when I realized it. I hadn't laughed like that in years. One Saturday, Malik and the others helped me repaint the sign above the workshop door. Coleman Woodworks. And beneath it in smaller letters, made by hand, rebuilt by heart. The kids liked that. They said it sounded cool. I just smiled. That night, as I locked up, the air was heavy with honeysuckle and the hum of summer insects. I leaned against the doorway, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. I thought of Bethany, of how easily a life can bend out of shape when truth becomes optional. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate took too much space. She was gone, and so was the man I used to be when I loved her. What remained was someone simpler, maybe even stronger. Emily called that evening. "How's the shop?" she asked. "Loud," I said, chuckling. "You'd think we were building an ark." "Maybe you are," she said softly. "A place for people who almost drowned." I didn't answer right away, but after she hung up, I looked around the workshop at the sawdust, the laughter still echoing, the small projects drying on the shelves, and thought, yeah, maybe that's exactly what this is. Weeks passed. The days filled themselves with work laughter and the soft rhythm of renewal. I still woke up early, brewed my coffee, and sat on the porch as the sun came up over the marsh.
But now I didn't sit there asking questions about revenge or healing. I just sat there breathing. The silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like peace. And for the first time in a long time, when I smiled, it wasn't rehearsed. It was real. It began as a series of notes, scraps of thoughts scribbled between the hum of machines and the laughter of children in my workshop, sentences that didn't fit anywhere else. The quiet after truth isn't silence, it's oxygen. Grief is just love with nowhere to go. You can sand wood smoother than a heart. At first, I didn't even think of writing a book. I just wanted to make sense of what had happened, how an entire life could collapse so neatly and still leave you breathing. Emily was the one who suggested it. "You tell stories well," she said one afternoon, watching me wipe varnish off a table's edge. "Maybe that's what you should build next. Not furniture, something people can hold here." She touched her chest. That night, I opened my laptop, wrote a title at the top of a blank page, and stared at it for a long time. My Quiet Vengeance. It wasn't about punishment. It was about survival, about what dignity looks like when you're standing in the wreckage, still choosing grace. The words came slowly at first, like rain reluctant to fall, then faster. Every night after closing the shop, I'd sit at the kitchen table and write until the coffee turned cold. I changed names, I softened details. I made myself a teacher instead of a craftsman, turned Savannah into a fictional coastal town called Eldershore. But the bones were real, the betrayal, the calm, unraveling the night of truth. I wrote about the smell of wood and rosemary, the ache of silence after laughter, the way light changes when you stop pretending. When I finished the last page, I didn't feel triumph. I felt emptied. Clean, maybe, like I'd finally said everything I'd meant to say without shouting. I self-published it online under a pseudonym, R.L. Morgan. I didn't tell anyone. But stories like secrets have their own way of spreading. Someone shared a chapter on a forum for people healing from infidelity. Then another. Within months, My Quiet Vengeance found its way onto blogs, podcasts, and book clubs. Readers wrote to Mr. Morgan about the calm strength in his words, about how revenge had never sounded so gentle. A year later, an editor from a small press in Atlanta emailed me. "We believe this could reach more people. Would you consider letting us publish a wider edition?" I hesitated. I'd built my piece in private. I didn't want to become anyone's symbol. But something in me, a quiet, braver part, said yes. When the book hit shelves, it carried a cover of muted blue and gold, a single candle burning against the dark. It sold modestly at first, then wildly. People called it healing literature. Others called it moral suspense. One critic wrote, "It's not about revenge, it's about dignity, reclaimed." That line made me smile. 6 months after publication, I received a letter. The envelope was familiar, the handwriting even more so. Bethany. For a long time, I didn't open it. It sat on my desk for 3 days beside my notebook and the mug of pens I never used. When I finally unfolded it, her words were neat, steady, heartbreakingly human. "Roger, I read the book. I knew it was you before page 10. I cried because you captured me exactly as I was, selfish, lost, half alive.
You gave me more kindness in those pages than I deserved. I'm sorry not for being caught, but for forgetting who you were when you needed me most. I hope you found peace. Bethany. I stared at the letter until the ink blurred. She was right. I had found peace, but not the kind she imagined, not the peace of forgetting or forgiving her to free her. No, the peace was quieter inward. I didn't write her back. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't a door you open for them. It's a window you open for yourself, just wide enough to let the air in again." I closed the book, turned off the light, and stood by the window. Outside, the trees moved with the wind, bending but not breaking. Somewhere out there, Bethany was reading my words, maybe understanding at last what silence had meant, and I finally was breathing without pain. The crack ran straight through the middle of the table, clean, deliberate like a fault line in miniature. I ran my fingers along it, feeling the uneven ridge where the grain had split. It wasn't the first piece of wood I'd repaired that year, but it was the one that meant something. This was the table Bethany and I had eaten at for 25 years, the same table where I'd laid out the truth one unforgettable Christmas night. Now, a year later, I was giving it a second life. On the workbench beside me sat a small bowl of gold-dusted lacquer, shimmering in the morning light. Kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending broken pottery with gold, honoring the break instead of hiding it. I'd read about it months ago and couldn't shake the metaphor. If wood could remember its wounds, maybe healing was just a matter of filling the cracks with something precious. The brush moved slowly, carefully, my hands steady, in a way they hadn't been for years. Each stroke traced a scar and turned it into light. Outside, Savannah's winter rain whispered against the windows, soft, persistent. The air smelled like pine and varnish, the workshop warm with quiet music. My phone buzzed once, a photo message from Emily. Her daughter, cap and gown, standing in the drizzle, smiling so wide, it made my chest ache in the best way. Beneath the photo, Emily had written, "She did it. I thought you'd want to see." I smiled. For a moment I saw Emily in the reflection of the screen, stronger now, color in her face, eyes alive. We still spoke often, but rarely of the past. Ours was a friendship built on something rarer than love, understanding. We'd both been through the fire, and neither of us needed the flames anymore. I sent back a simple reply. "Tell her I'm proud. Tell her you should be too." Then I set the phone down and returned to the table. The crack gleamed faintly now, the gold setting into the wood like sunlight caught in a riverbed. I ran a cloth over it and stepped back. It wasn't perfect, nothing real ever is, but it was beautiful. Stronger because of the break, not in spite of it. The rain deepened a low percussion on the roof. I stood by the window, mug of coffee warming my hands, watching droplets trace their slow paths down the glass. A year ago, this house had been a stage for betrayal. Now it was quiet again, no ghosts, no echoes, just the steady rhythm of weather and breath. People still talk sometimes how my story had become a book, then almost a movie, how I'd handled it better than most. They used words like brave and wise and inspirational, but I didn't feel like any of those things. I just felt finally at peace. There's a kind of revenge that shouts, that burns everything down to prove it can, and then there's the kind that whispers, the kind that rebuilds. As I looked at the gold seam running through the table, I thought sweet revenge is peace. Nothing louder. I turned off the workshop light and let the soft gray of the storm fill the room. The gold caught the last of it, glowing like a quiet truth. I wasn't the same man who'd once planned the perfect dinner to expose a lie. That man had burned out with the candles. The one standing here was different, slower, gentler, finally unafraid of silence. When people asked later how I survived it, I always told them the same thing. I didn't burn the house down, I'd say. I just turned on the lights. And that was enough. You know, people keep asking me if it was worth it, all that planning, all that silence, all that fire I kept inside. And I tell them this: revenge doesn't rebuild you, but it clears the ground so you finally can. I didn't win her back. I didn't want to. I won myself back, the man who forgot his worth, his peace, his power. So no, I didn't burn the house down. I just turned on the lights and walked out into the quiet. That quiet, that's my revenge.